This week marks the 82nd anniversary of the Hindenburg disaster, the Titanic of airships. More than 2 football fields long, 13 stories high, 808 feet in length, making it only 70 feet shorter than the Titanic. To gauge exactly just how large the Hindenburg was, you could easily fit a 747 jet inside her hull. It was the length of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., and standing side by side, it is only 450 feet shorter than the Empire State Building, which is a height of 1,250 feet. In spite of being filled with the highly flammable gas hydrogen, the Hindenburg made 62 successful transatlantic crossings from March 4, 1936, and ultimately ended in disaster at Lakehurst Naval Station, New Jersey on May 6, 1937. Over the decades, there have been many comparisons between traveling by airship versus ocean liner. While crossing the Atlantic on a ship such as the Titanic, you were surrounded by the opulence of Victorian luxury. The Hindenburg was less on the extravagances. It was built more for speed than comfort. A typical crossing during the 1930s would have taken 3 to 5 days on board ships like the Queen Mary, while the Hindenburg could make the crossing in just 43 hours. However, the Hindenburg was not without amenities. It did have fine dining and a first-ever aluminum baby grand piano that weighed just under 350 pounds versus the typical 500 to 1,300 pounds. In an airship, weight was everything. A ship the size of the Hindenburg had to be built so large as to house the gigantic gas cells that contained the hydrogen in order to give it the lift needed to carry it to the normal cruising height of 1,000 feet. On the Hindenburg's final voyage in May 1937, the Nazi Party was using the airship for its propaganda value. Besides the swastika symbols on its rear fins, it also carried emblazoned on its side the Olympic rings from the 1936 Olympics that were hosted in Berlin the year before. The question that forever has intrigued investigators, officials, and researchers is the what happened in those final moments at the mooring mast. Captain Ernst Lehmann, who actually walked out of the fire of the wreckage, had no clue as to what could have happened. In hospital just a few hours before he passed away, he told a colleague perhaps lightning was to blame, as the ship took a detour to fly over the Manhattan skyline while they waited for a storm to pass in New Jersey, where they would be doing the landing. Captain Max Pruss wanted to give the storm plenty of time to pass before making any attempt to land. While the storm did pass, the ship had to make several attempts at their approach due to high winds. The idea that perhaps St. Elmo's fire could have been the cause of the destruction was considered due to the possibility that the ship may have acquired an electrical charge from passing through the clouds on approaching the mooring mast. And when the attempt to ground the ship to the earth with its mooring lines, an electrical spark traveling up the lines to the ship, thus causing the release of the electrical energy. But this was ruled out as it would have resulted in an instant chain reaction, and the explosion didn't occur for another 4 minutes after the line drops. It was reported from one witness that he thought he saw a flutter in the skin near the stern of the ship just moments before, as if perhaps hydrogen had been leaking from one of the cells. Another consideration was due to one of the sharp left turns the ship made in order to approach. It was thought perhaps a steering cable may have snapped due to the wind gusts, and the loose cable could have struck sparks, and any leakage would have set the fire in motion. Around the 80th anniversary of the crash, it was reported that the paint and powder used to cover the outer skin with, in order to keep it from expanding too much in direct sunlight, was a mix of iron oxide and aluminum-impregnated cellulose. Unbeknownst to German engineers at the time, they had no idea they were covering the Hindenburg with a mixture that would later be used for rocket fuel. While this seems to be a very solid explanation, it doesn't prove to be true. For if it were truly the case, the entire skin would have been burned off in seconds, and as evidenced from the film footage captured of the crash, the fire comes from within the ship, and even at one point as the ship is crashing to the ground, the name of the ship can be seen on the outer skin. In 1972, author Michael Mooney wrote the novel Hindenburg, which consequently was turned into a major motion picture in 1975 starring George C. Scott and Anne Bancroft. From this perspective, it is believed the Hindenburg was destroyed via sabotage in order to show resistance to Hitler and the Nazi Party. While this is certainly a possibility, no official findings were ever concluded that deliberate destruction had come to the airship, even though Captain Max Bruce had publicly expressed his belief a bomb was to blame for the fire. Regardless if it had been a gas leak, a broken cable, striking sparks, lightning, or sabotage, the crash of the Hindenburg became the catalyst to end all passenger travel aboard airships. And the Zeppelin company soon saw their ships being dismantled by the German military to take advantage of its steel in order to begin building Göring's new Luftwaffe. Hitler had called the disaster an act of God, as the Nazi Party refused to believe one person could bring down their great symbol of power. It had been suggested that Captain Ernst Lehmann was on board as a diplomat to negotiate with the American military to provide the Zeppelin company with the much safer and non-flammable gas, helium. Ironically, with America controlling the monopoly of helium, it was never suggested by the German government that the United States was any way to blame for not allowing access to the formula for helium, thus forcing the German military to continue using the highly unstable hydrogen instead. The actual duration of the crash is approximately 40 seconds long, and incredibly, with 97 aboard, 62 survived. In the 82 years since the disaster, the one constant is the deeply emotional witness account from 31-year-old radio announcer Herb Morrison from WLS Chicago, who happened to be the only broadcaster on hand that fateful day. The recording of Morrison's reaction to the event is still to this day one of the most heartbreaking and professional eyewitness accounts ever captured by a news reporter. In a time where 90% of the media was heard via radio, Morrison had to be the eyes of listeners and describe the event in every detail possible while fighting the emotion of the tragedy unfolding before his very eyes. While tragic, Morrison's account is historic and thankfully forever captured for future generations to experience and learn from.
Starting to rain again. The rain had slacked up a little bit. The back motors of the ship are just holding it just enough to keep it from... It bursts into flames. Get it started. It's fighting, and it's crashing. It's crashing terrible. Oh, my, get out of the way, please. It's bursting into flames, and it's falling on the mooring mast and all the folks between it. This is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. Oh, it's like 400 or 500 feet into the sky, and it's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. The smoke and the flames now, and the flame is crashing to the ground, not quite to the mooring mast. All the humanity and all the fans are just screaming around it. I told you, I can't talk to people. There's friends around there. I can't talk, ladies and gentlemen. Honest, it's just laying down massive smoking wreckage. And everybody can't hardly breathe and talk and screaming. Lady, I'm sorry. Honestly, I can hardly breathe. I'm going to step inside where I cannot see it. Charlie, that's terrible. Listen, folks, I'm going to have to stop for a minute because I've lost the voice. This is the worst thing I've ever witnessed.